All right, well, welcome to Workshop on a Tightrope. What can you expect and how can you prepare? This is a free mini class that we've put together just right before we're starting this workshop, this 6-week online class that is going to be catered really towards mixed faith couples. And I'm Natasha Helfer Parker. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist. That's been my primary professional identity from, almost 25 years now. And I've been working with mixed faith couples pretty primarily in my practice for about 12 to 15 years. I am considered kind of one of the leading experts in this area. There's not a lot of, I guess there aren't a lot of us that would be considered that, but there are others as well. So I'm really happy to be able to be here with all of you and joining with Allan and Katie, who have invited me to be part of this process with them. So with that, let me turn it over to Allan and Katie to introduce yourselves.
Allan and Katie, if you're in this live, you're in our Facebook group. So hopefully you know who you are. If you're joining and you don't know who you are, you may be confused. What is Marriage on a Tightrope? Maybe you joined the wrong group, but we do have a vetting process, so probably not. But I'm Allan, and this is Katie.
And I'm Katie. And we are excited to be here.
Yeah, just a couple of days away from number of months worth of preparation and work to kick off our online course, Workshop on a Tightrope. So we're excited. And as you all, if you're not familiar with Natasha, you're about to be clinically, personally, she's just great. And so we're really excited. And yeah, let's dig in. And again, as you're joining here, if you have any questions, we've got the chat window up here. If you have any comments or anything like that, just feel free to do that and we'll jump into it.
And I'll just say really quick, we are going to be sharing this recording of this class on kind of social media forums. So Katie and Allan, there will be people who might look into this who don't really know who you are, who aren't part of your Facebook group. So I will just add that Katie and Allan aren't a mixed faith couple. They come at this from a personal perspective and lots of personal experience. And they started this great podcast called Marriage on a Tightrope several years ago as they were working through a lot of the things that they were figuring out along the way and challenges. And they've created this great community and resource for other couples to be able to share experiences and be able to share their stories and suggestions and things that are extremely useful in these kinds of situations. So just a shout out to the two of you.
Thank you for doing a proper introduction. And for those that are joining live, if you do have a question, we won't say your name since this will be shared outside of our group. At the end of the recording, we'll stop the recording and kind of turn on video if anyone wants to say hi or just chat for a minute. It'll be fun.
Okay, sounds good. All right, so let's get going. So yeah, basically the idea of tonight's class is to help you kind of get an idea of what, if you do register for our course, what you're going to be signing up for, and also how you might prepare or feel prepared to be able to sign up for the course. We'll also be kind of touching a little bit about on motivation. Sometimes there might be one of you who might be really excited to take this course and you're like, oh, let's go do this. And there might be another one of you that's like, oh, that's the last thing I want to do. So we're going to talk a little bit about how you can have those discussions in hopefully a positive way.
Sounds perfect.
Yeah. So I'm a big believer that in order to have a good experience, you kind of got to know what the guidelines and expectations are. That way we're all on the same page from the get-go. So I'm going to have the two of you kind of take these first 4 points, and then I'm going to talk about the last one.
Absolutely. So the agenda that we're going to be going through is very specific to the marriage relationship and family life relationship. So we don't have an agenda for either side of belief or involvement with the religion. So to make, whether you are on the more believing side or the less believing side, there's not going to be any fear of Natasha, Katie, or myself trying to get somebody to either leave the church or abandon faith or to stay in the church. That is not the role of this course.
Thank you.
Okay, I'll take this one. So Natasha is an expert in a general field of study, and well, Allan and I, we are experts in our own marriage and working with others in faith transitions. We've been doing this for about a little over 2 years, and we've had a very
just the podcast. We've done the mixed faith marriage thing for about 3.5 or so.
Right. But as far as working with other couples,
Yeah.
we have really, the last 2 years, have talked to a lot of people, worked with a lot of couples in our position. So we've heard a lot of things, and, you know, you are the expert in your own life. So we will be recommending self or couple authority throughout this course as a primary guiding force for all of you.
Yeah, I usually say I'm like a general guideline, but just because I can talk about statistics and what usually is effective or what usually is helpful doesn't necessarily mean that that will apply to your particular situation. So
right.
we want to give you a lot of authority in deciding what's going to work best for you. Perfect.
All right. So what we don't want to have happen is that you take your version of what you heard us say and use that as a weapon against your partner back home. We have the same fear for our podcasts as well. We don't want people to take what either has or hasn't worked in our relationship and use that as a bludgeon or a sharper instrument of war to hurt your spouse or to use it against them. That's certainly not where we want to go.
Yeah, I would say confirmation bias is a thing where we're wired to kind of hear things to help our perspective. That's normal. That's part of being human. So I'm always very interested in hearing what people think I've said. That's a very interesting thing. And then, you know, there's a difference between saying, well, see, I told you, you know, Natasha and Katie said this, and I've been saying that all along, versus maybe saying something like, you know, that was really useful to hear them talk about this. And what do you think? You know, so you can use us, just don't use us like a baseball bat.
Right.
Exactly.
All right.
Katie?
Oh, I'll talk about this. So this process takes time, and this is one tool in your box of tools towards meeting your goals. So, I mean, this is just one avenue that we're providing for you. You may need to revisit it at different points of your journey, as well as incorporate other tools. So we are not by any means claiming that all the things will be worked out in 6 weeks. That is not realistic. Allan and I, it has taken us, you know, some time to work through things, but
we've got it all figured out now, right? There's never any issues.
Never.
None. Zero.
But yeah, have those realistic expectations, because it's going to be part of your success. And, you know, this, I would say, is just a good, like any good roadmap. It gives you points, and you can choose to follow them, and there are different routes you can take. And so that's kind of what we're here for, is to give you those key points that we're going to touch on that you can work through. But again, there are so many different tools in your toolbox you can use.
And the last point I'll make is that, you know, whenever you're going to take advantage of kind of like a self-help program, which is a book or a class or a workshop, that's kind of more of a self-help type of resource. It's going to be useful and helpful if you have already kind of some basic guidelines and kind of starting place. You're in a starting place where there's some fairly healthy spaces to begin with. And what I mean by fairly healthy doesn't mean that you have to be like perfect by any means, but just where there wouldn't be, for example, domestic violence types of dynamics between the two of you. Also, you know, maybe severe mental health issues or things that have not really been addressed that would interfere with your ability to take the content and the resources in this class and really be able to apply it in a way that would be beneficial to your relationship. So if there's severe mental health concerns or any type of domestic violence issue, which of course is physical, sexual, financial, emotional, I would really highly recommend that you get some marital counseling first, just to help you get to a more basic space of safety so then you can incorporate things like we'll be sharing in this class in an effective way.
Yeah, Natasha, we have a question.
Yes.
What if only one spouse is interested in participating? Is the course still worthwhile?
Yes, I would say absolutely. One of my favorite books, actually, that I read at the very beginning of my marriage and family therapy training was by a therapist called Michelle Weiner Davis, and she wrote a book. I believe it was the name of the book, or maybe it was a chapter in the book, that it said it takes one to tango. So there is a lot that you can do when a partner maybe doesn't want to go to marriage counseling, or maybe doesn't want to take this class, or maybe seems resistant to some of the things that you're hoping to change or improve upon in your relationship. So if you are inviting your spouse to join you and they refuse, you can definitely still benefit from the materials, the content, the applications and strategies that you can use on your side of that fence. And it can also probably help you, over the long run, have better decision-making skills as to whether or not the relationship is going to be viable for you. So
right.
In general, it should be. Plus, a lot of times couples, one person is ready before another person is. Mm-hmm. So even if you take the class now, it doesn't mean that 2 or 5 months from now, your partner wouldn't be ready to be open to that material. And then this material will be yours. So you will have all the downloaded videos and the homeworks and the exercises and the recordings at your fingertips. So you'll be able to share it with your spouses anytime that they want to be open to it.
We have another very important question.
Yes.
When you play Monopoly, which Monopoly piece do you choose?
Well, my 2 favorite are the car and the dog.
No, I'm the Scotty dog. You can have the car.
Okay. I'm the ship.
See?
I like the ship.
We've all got it. We're fighting. That's good.
Perfect. All right. So moving on. So I think that it's really important to start from an intentional space. So this may seem like a silly question. Do I want to navigate a mixed faith marriage successfully and effectively? You might be like, well, duh. But I do think it's important to ask it because believe it or not, there may be some other things that you may want more than that. Sometimes I really want to be right. And I want to be justified. And therefore, sometimes we have competing desires and wants. And so I think that really posing this question to yourself and what it's going to take, because it will take compromise, it will take flexibility, it will take new skills and strength and growth and, all these things that are uncomfortable. It's really important to start with the yes. And we're good at this as Mormons because, and by the way, I use the word Mormon very loosely because I think we're all still Mormon in some way or another because we all come from this tribe. But we come from this tradition where we were, asked or expected to make decisions, right? And if you made a decision and it was going to be easier to stand by it. And there is some truth to that. Like that's backed up by some research. So this can, if you come into this question honestly and really intentionally, I think that's an important space to start.
Yeah. Katie, go ahead.
Well, I think that's one of the first things that Allan and I had to ask ourselves is, am I okay if Allan never comes back to church? And Allan, are you okay if I never leave the church?
Right.
And, do we want to stay together? That we asked ourselves that very first before we moved forward. And then once we had the foundation, we knew we wanted it to work. Then we could build upon that.
And there are in the hundreds of couples that we've either had dinners with, texts, had conversations with, emails from, most of them by the time they get to us have made that decision that, yes, we want to navigate this. I would imagine most of the people that are watching would be in the same boat. Not everybody. We do get messages from people that say, I'm not sure if I want to do this. I'm not sure if I want to do this. That's why we're asking that question. Like that's what the purpose of the course is. You've made that choice to navigate it, to strengthen it. And that's what we're going to try to help you do.
Yeah, and I'm really glad you brought that up, because that reminds me of a point. A lot of times when I'm sitting with couples that are just going to start or are thinking about starting, for example, just a marital therapy process, sometimes they are on the fence. They're like, I don't know. Do I want this marriage to last? Is it worth the energy and the compromise that I know it's going to take? Especially if we've got, a history of maybe some really tough years, etc. So I think it's perfectly okay to not know 100%, right? Mm-hmm. Sometimes you don't know. However, if you stay in this space of what I call kind of like wavering or on the fence, what happens is typically the 10 minutes of the day that you're having a good time together, you're like, great, this is great. We're going to stay married. This is going to work. And then 20 minutes later, when you tick each other off, you're like, this is so not going to work, right? So you're going to be on this like emotional roller coaster that's very wearying and very exhaustive, and that will really wear you down. And if you did have any hope of making the marriage work, it's really going to attack that. So my suggestion is if you are on the fence, if you could at least answer this question in the affirmative. If you're on the fence, if you already know you don't want to work it out, that's a different thing. But if you're on the fence, you can answer it in the affirmative for like a 3 to 6 month process, so that you really shelf any thought of divorce or separation, so that when those moments come up, you're not constantly being seduced by them. And then you can make a more kind of conscious and mindful decision once you've stepped away. And I call this making a decision from the helicopter, where you get a lay of the land, versus making a decision in the trenches, where a lot of times you're more crisis centered and in survival mode. So I hope that makes sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it did.
So my next thing is, if we want to know what we want to do and where we want to go to, I do think it's somewhat important to have a roadmap or an equation per se. Equations and roadmaps will usually fail you, but they're still good to have so that you have a basic lay of the land of where you're going. And I do think that this is a pretty good formula. I usually start from this place of really know where you come from and what that means as far as what you're bringing to the table in regards to your strengths and your weaknesses, individually and as a couple. When you come from, for example, an LDS background, whether it's generational or convert, that's going to mean certain things for each of you. You're going to come with certain family backgrounds as well. So not all Mormon families Mormon the same way. You're going to have also some cultural differences, some socioeconomic, maybe possibly differences, conflict style differences, lots of things that are going to be very important for you to understand, so that you know, okay, this is kind of where we're at, and therefore now we know where we can go. And there are some things in Mormonism even that are strengths in regards to doctrinal foundations for mixed faith marriages, and there are weaknesses in Mormon doctrine as well. So even knowing kind of just from where we come from as far as a faith and a religious culture, there are going to be things that are going to be helpful for you and things that maybe are not, just like every other aspect. Number 2 is, I think, this idea of giving yourself permission and to choose this relational intentionality, which is just what we were talking about. I think it's really important to know what's possible. We don't have a lot of role modeling around mixed faith marriages and mixed faith families. So it's hard to know what you're working towards when you haven't seen like 500 people do it before you. Mm-hmm. That's why I think it's so powerful to have a group like what's been created on Marriage on a Tightrope, because you can see what other people are doing. And so to know what's available, what's possible, and how you can create a new vision for your family, because the Mormon family ideal picture is very practiced, and we do have a lot of role modeling about how that works when both parents are Mormon. So we need to start creating that so that you have role modeling to move forward. We need to practice. That's the way you learn. That's the way you really get good and make things sustainable. Information is just the first step. It's educational, but it's not until you put it into practice that it really becomes sustainable and habitual. We want to, of course, then look at tune-ups as you're practicing. What do we need to revisit? What do we need to rework? What do we need to bring back to the drawing table? What did we think was going to work, but it didn't? How do we, use it kind of as a laboratory, exploratory space? And then how do we have a very clear picture of what we're creating? And if we need deeper work than like a 6-week class could offer, how do we get ongoing support or more intensive therapy or coaching? Any thoughts from the mounts on my amazing equation?
It's a beautiful formula.
It is.
So
I'm very equational. Do you want to know why I'm equational? Because I come from Mormonism.
If I do X, Y, and Z, this will happen.
That's right.
I think that's what we are conditioned to want to have an outcome, right? I mean, we want to know, like, what is the roadmap? What outcome am I going to expect to have? I think it's just indoctrinated in us.
Yeah, it's a charged word, honey. It's a charged word.
Wow.
So when I look at number one, one thing I would want to do is sit down and write out what my strengths and weaknesses are, what your strengths and weaknesses are. I think we're probably in a place where we could write down what the other person's strengths and weaknesses are and not cause a fight about it and compare those lists. When you were talking about that, one of my weaknesses is I'm very impulsive in my speech. I've learned to control that a little bit, but that also lends itself to a strength because I help Katie overcome one of her weaknesses, which is she doesn't like to communicate, and especially when it's confrontational or it's she's gotten so much better. And
so are you saying I confront you a lot more?
Well, you have fierce conversations with me. So I don't know, making those lists of strengths and weaknesses, you get to see kind of how they go together, where the friction points are, and how you work together. And you can immediately think of examples of, oh my goodness, yes, I'm so impulsive. And that really actually works well when you don't want to talk because I just come out and say it like, what is wrong? Talk to me. And I don't want to talk. Anyway.
Thanks for that example.
I love you.
Well, and I like that you brought up that really our strengths usually our strengths and our weaknesses are usually part of a two-sided coin.
Right.
If I'm confident, well, that sometimes that can make me narcissistic. If I'm quiet, that can make me a really good listener. It's like,
sure.
There's pros and cons to most of the things that we bring to the table.
Definitely.
Yeah, and this is actually this formula. I can't take total credit for it. It's actually modeled after the Plicit model, which is actually a sex therapy model. For those of you who might not know me, I'm also a sex therapist and have studied human sexuality for a long time, for about 7 years now. And this is modeled under helping people when they come in, how do you organize kind of a process with them? And the P stands for permission, giving them permission to talk about something, giving them permission to have the issue that they're having and have a space where it's going to be safe to discuss it. LI stands for limited information. So a lot of times you tell people a few things and they're like, oh, I didn't know that. And that's very helpful. And that's all I needed, and off they go. The SS stands for specific strategies. So again, sometimes with information and then some specific strategies, off they go. And then the IT is intensive therapy. Sometimes that's not enough. You really need to dive into more,
right.
In-depth kind of processes.
So Natasha, we've got a couple of questions.
Yeah.
One is asked by our very good friend who we don't want to say his or her name because we're being anonymous right now, but how can processing grief get in the way of following the formula?
Oh, I think processing grief is going to be all along the formula. I don't know that there's a step in here where you're not going to have an opportunity to revisit grief. And, we could probably do a whole another mini lesson on grief and the grief cycle, but basically a mixed faith transition is a grief process for both of you, right? So you're having to grieve a certain type of expectation of what life was going to look like. You're going to have to grieve maybe a certain perspective or kind of relationship that you had. There's just a lot of different things. And so, and as we know, I always tease that it would be nice if the grief cycle was a to-do checklist, because we, again, as Mormons, are very good at those. And if I could just say, oh, check, I'm done with my anger phase.
Right.
Or
right.
check, I'm done with my denial phase. I've now reached acceptance, the celestial kingdom, and I'm done. But that's not how it works. There's many times throughout the life cycle and the developmental cycle of where you are in your relationship where you will have opportunities to revisit grief and the many processes that come with that.
Great. There's a second question, and I'll just read it. It says, how does one negotiate more intimacy in marriage when the other spouse is triggered by this topic?
So I don't know if triggered just in the negotiation. I'm not sure exactly, listener, if you want to specify what you mean, but it seems to be asking, I want more intimacy, but I can't even bring that up without it triggering my spouse.
Right. So I think that what is being asked here is that we used to share a certain level of intimacy, maybe in the department of being able to talk about things like our faith, our religion, our ideas, our beliefs. And now whenever that's brought up, it causes this friction and this sadness and this maybe anger, avoidance, right? Some people will avoid the topic at all costs. Some people will want to process it ad nauseum. So an intimacy that you once shared is now no longer an intimacy that feels stable. And that can be very disconcerting to people. So I just want to say that I think it's a great question. Many of the things that we'll be talking about in the 6-week course will hopefully help elevate that ability of reworking that intimacy that you once had. It won't look the same, but you can still have spiritual, what I call spiritual or ethereal intimacy. I usually talk about intimacies from 4 different perspectives. There's emotional intimacy, which is how well do we do in sharing our feelings. There's intellectual intimacy, which is how well do we do at being interesting to one another, quite frankly. There's spiritual or ethereal intimacy, which is kind of like our shared meaning in life, shared beliefs, respect for each other's beliefs if they're not shared, dreams, goals. And then there's physical intimacy, which is your sex life, as well as your non-sexual affection, touch and cuddling and holding hands and things like that. So most couples tend to be pretty good at 2 or 3 of those and not so great at 1 or 2. Mm-hmm. If you married another Mormon, like many of us did, you probably shared a bit, probably your spiritual intimacy felt very strong. And so if that was one of the 2 or 3 that you had, and now it's no longer feeling very strong, you can see why that might feel like the whole foundation is crumbling or, at unease. So we want to help you learn how to rebuild that intimacy and also make sure that you're not just focused on that intimacy, that there are 3 other levels that you can also be working on.
Mm-hmm.
Great. Thank you.
All right. So moving on. So I want to take a little bit of time to talk about discomfort. So Kattie and Allan, I'll put you on the spot since you're my audience. So growing up Mormon, if we got, if people were talking to us about being uncomfortable, what typically were they trying to teach us in Sunday school? What did discomfort mean?
I have an answer, but I want you to answer unless you want me to.
So I think I would associate discomfort, at least from what they would teach us in young men or young women, is that those are negative feelings from Satan. Yeah. And those, there we go.
There he is. Well, that is a disturbing Satan.
Really cute.
So cute. No, I definitely was told that I should always feel peace. I should always feel good about my choices, and if I don't feel good about it, it's because you're in the wrong. So, right. Yeah. Is that what you were going to say?
Yeah, it's the spirit has left. That's why you're feeling uncomfortable, why there's discomfort in the air.
Right. Yeah, so this is a really big issue, especially if it had to do with stuff that didn't correlate with the teachings, right? So if you felt uncomfortable about paying your tithing, well, that's because you needed to work on it yourself, not because of Satan. But if you felt uncomfortable about not reading your scriptures or not having a testimony or doing something maybe sexual that you weren't supposed to be doing, that's because, there was something wrong or evil or upsetting about it. And, I think in Mormon culture, like most Christian cultures and most of American culture, we have a real kind of allergy to discomfort, that we want to avoid it. Many people deal with avoidant conflict styles because of this. And we grew up with this kind of idea that contention is of the devil, right? Mm-hmm. So when your feet, so if all of a sudden you're in a mixed faith relationship and there is contention and there is discomfort, of course, that would be a very normal way to respond to that on either side. This can really get in the way of conversation and dialogue and negotiation, because anytime you pull the God trump card or the Satan trump card, or I would even say the science trump card, right. They're trump cards, and they don't allow for conversation and negotiation, which is what we really want to help you be able to do. So what I'd like to say is that there might be some other reasons why you might be feeling uncomfortable. One is that danger is afoot. So, and if your idea of successful life and, was the one and only true way, of course, you're going to feel like possibly your spouse's issues with the church are going to threaten the status quo. And it is threatening the status quo. If you're the non-believer, you may also be feeling like there's some danger afoot if your spouse just doesn't follow your lead. So you can feel some very legitimate reasons that there might be some dangers, and we'll talk about what legitimate dangers there are in the course. But other reasons why you might feel uncomfortable is that anytime that you are invited in life to face a challenge, you're usually invited to stretch. And I don't know how many of you can get into that position, but it would take me a long time of discomfort to really work up to that level of flexibility. So is the discomfort bad for me? No, it's good for me. And we actually, again, have a lot of history in our Mormonism where we do talk about trials or difficulties as opportunities for growth, for change, for shifting, for learning. And so it's okay to be uncomfortable if you're having to learn something new, if you're having to lean in a direction you've never leaned in before or never expected to lean. Mm-hmm. And then the last one that I'll talk about is, I don't know how many of you have gone through physical therapy for surgery. I have several times. And that's very uncomfortable. Healing is uncomfortable. So sometimes when you have a faith transition is opportunities to heal aspects of your relationship that you haven't attended to before, or heal aspects of your background that you haven't attended to before, and it's going to be uncomfortable. I oftentimes remember driving thinking, I am voluntarily driving myself to the torture chamber. Why am I doing that? Right? But I did that because I knew I wanted my leg to work. I knew I wanted to be able to ski again, after I tore my ACL, and so I knew I wanted to face that discomfort in order to heal. So I don't know what you guys' thoughts are about reasons for discomfort, but I think this is really important.
Yeah, this is I think a lesson that I didn't learn until just a couple of years ago outside of athletics, of, weight training, and you're literally tearing down your muscles so that they can be strengthened. You're putting yourself deliberately through discomfort so that you can grow. And that's something that in my own personal journey, I have felt, and in our mixed faith marriage, that as you have those fierce conversations, when Katie read that book and she came to me and said, we're going to have some conversations, I was like, dang girl, let's do this. And when she would bring those things up, yeah, it was uncomfortable. I'm not used to her confronting me. And imposing that discomfort on me, but we sat down and we had those conversations and we felt that discomfort, and you come out stronger because of it.
I like the example of healing is discomfort, because it does take time to heal, and it does take baby steps. You know, it's not going to be all at once. And then when you see yourself making progress, you get confident and you feel like, okay, I can do this. And so I think that that's a good example, is that healing, you're going to find discomfort, but you're also going to gain confidence in that healing. You know, if you're talking, if you're doing the things to help you move along. And that's really important too in your marriage.
Awesome. All right. So we want to really start out with this idea that if you're going to reconstruct something, you do need to deconstruct. And so we're going to encourage you, as you hopefully go with us on this journey, to not resist delving into the past. A lot of times in therapy settings, I hear people say, oh, I don't want to dwell in the past, or I don't want to blame my parents, or I don't want to, spend a lot of time being sad about things that I can no longer control. And there is some wisdom in that. I'm not a big fan of spending a lot of time on the past. Psychotherapy, psychodynamic therapy back in like more Freudian days was more about spending years on the couch. We don't really do that much in therapy anymore. Therapy has become a little bit more solution focused, but there is wisdom also in understanding where you come from. When we talk about your family and your parents and the church and all these things, it's not that we're trying to be mad at them or hold them accountable or be super angry. It's that we need to understand patterns and systems so that we know what we're up against and where we need to go next. So whether that's intergenerational dynamics or church cultural dynamics, I think it's really important. And somebody had already mentioned grief work. And I'm like, yep, that's part of this, which includes anger. Sorry. and we're going to talk a lot about the importance and also the paralyzation of anger. Anger is a very important and motivating emotion. It can also be a place where people get stuck, and it can be a real form of contention in a mixed faith relationship. So part of the course will be really deconstructing how to make anger a motivational, powerful emotion in your process, and not one that gets you stuck or paralyzed or kind of toxic, if that makes sense. And we really want to help you create, again, blueprints of what you want to build. So the metaphor of like remodeling, of tearing something down and making it better, sometimes you're able to keep a lot of the framing of a home. Sometimes you got to just burn the whole place down and start over. So it depends on where you come from and where you want to go as far as how much work this will take. But understanding where you're going is very important.
Have we started reconstructing, Katie?
I think so. I don't know.
We don't want to give too much away of what we're doing. I absolutely think that we have. And in many of ways, there's the weekly agenda and topics that we're covering. Going through those topics and building that material and talking about it, we've looked at ways of, oh my goodness, remember how this used to be, and now look at what it is today. I'm being very general and vague, but it's a really helpful process for me just to be able to look back and know that a lot of ground has been made, and we're building something different than what we thought we were going to have. That's not always a bad thing. It's actually a very good thing in many ways.
I think too, because Allan doesn't, the church is really good at giving us the, blueprint, and you see your life, and it's very scary when that's taken away. But when you're also in the construction phase, it's kind of fun to decide what do I want? What do we want? And what does our future look like? That's a very exciting notion when you get to that point.
I love that. Yeah. And you're absolutely right. The church actually does a really good job of creating a blueprint that actually is very helpful in many ways to many people. And there usually are things there that you can very much keep, and that are actually very beneficial to any blueprint. But there might be ways that you can tweak things or create a whole new room that you never even imagined was possible, or create a different look. And there's lots of different beautiful homes out there that look very different and yet still serve the same purpose. And I think that's really important, to give yourselves permission to look different and yet still have all the essential ingredients of an effective home environment. Mm-hmm. All right, so let's talk a little bit about what maybe is keeping you or your spouse from signing up for this class. And these are some of the things that I usually hear from people. Maybe this is like a tender topic, like somebody had mentioned earlier. I'm not sure I want to bring up the conflict of talking to my spouse about taking this class. I'm already maybe in a place where I don't know if there's much hope for us. I've tried to get my spouse to do it, but they don't want to. I'm not sure I want to compromise my standards or values or beliefs or ideas. And I'm afraid that this class is maybe going to make me do that. I'm afraid that if we really do stop avoiding it and really face it, what that might mean and whether or not that would actually end up being a good thing for us or not. Do you resonate with any of these reasons or hear similar?
I was going to say, I think like a common one is just the avoidance of the subject altogether, and people don't want to face it head on. And I can completely understand how they feel. The problem, it doesn't go away. We've met with a number of couples who, they kind of have swept it under the rug, and it's been a year plus now. And one spouse is really struggling, because they haven't faced any of this and they have avoided talking about it, while the other one is just thinking that everything is totally fine and their marriage is great and things are going well. And we talked to a lot of couples that are in that position. So what would you say to them, Natasha, if they're just trying to avoid it? What are the dangers of doing that?
Yeah, well, we do know that avoiding things that are important to you does affect your mental health. I mean, that's that's a mental health issue. In fact, a lot of what therapy is about is helping people do or face the thing that they know they are avoiding, right? So that's something to think about. A little bit of what you're talking about goes into some of my motivation slides. So is it okay if I just kind of move on?
Yeah.
Yes, perfect.
So a lot of times when you're dealing with this, you assume somebody isn't motivated. And so I would just like to reframe that. I think most everyone is motivated. And I'll tell you what most everyone is motivated by, unless you're a sociopath. Sorry, but you're not a sociopath. Most of us are motivated by connection. Most of us want to feel connected to our partner. Most of us want to feel safe in our attachment with our partner. Most of us want to feel like our partner has our back, like we matter, that we're seen, that we're of value. Now, motivation can show up in two very classic ways, and this is sweeping with wide brushes, but there's sometimes a motivation to move into something different, to change, to shift what is currently happening. But there's also a motivation to protect and to keep the stability and the status quo. So in most marriages, there can be some very classic pursuer or withdrawer patterns where one person may wants to pursue the problem, wants to address the problem, wants to resolve the problem. And one person is more like, I'd rather avoid the problem. I'd rather have space from the problem. And there's actually wisdom in both of those methodologies, if that makes sense. There is wisdom in movement and change. There is wisdom in stability and status quo. And so instead of seeing that maybe as a big deterrent, or that you're not compatible, or that all is, doomed, if you could actually see that as an asset, that maybe if you're different in that way, you both bring something valuable to the table. Any thoughts about that?
Well, it's more of an anecdotal, personal thought and that always makes Katie nervous when I start to share things like that. It's quite funny because I'm changing. I kind of changed the contract, right? I changed And I'm pushing, I'm not trying to push or pull her out of her beliefs or out of the church, but I'm the one that has changed and is forcing this upon us. And in other aspects of our marriage, it's the opposite. It's, Katie wants to move the family to Italy for 90 days. Katie, not right now, but Katie wants to, go on a tour of the US and live in different cities for a month at a time. Katie wants to do these things and put a hot tub in the backyard. And she just painted the fireplace yesterday and today. And she's doing all of these things. And that stresses me out. Like thinking of putting in a hot tub and like, oh my gosh, I'm not that good of a salesman. How do we pay for this? And, how do we pay for these vacations and these travel things? And so I'm trying to like keep us locked down and stable here. And she wants to go on these adventures. And whenever we do, I love it. And so I'm like resistant to it, but still trying to keep us financially stable. Not that she's irresponsible in that way, but it's very interesting that some of these differences are not uniform across all different categories, if you will, if you can say it that way, in the marriage. We kind of fit different roles in different aspects of the marriage.
Well, and I love how you're really pointing out that it is an asset. It's an asset because you push each other in the ways that, you wouldn't push yourself maybe if you weren't attached to each other.
After a few trips, Allan will say, "Do you just need my money?" I said, "No, but for this, yes."
She likes the chest as a pillow once every 3 or 4 nights. So I think that's good too. Now this is a sobering comment that I'll read here. One of the live listeners says, "My wife is trying to avoid this. I am in a great non-believing place now. My sweet wife is so triggered by even bringing this subject up now. We both avoid it to keep happiness. It is a weird place to be. She only gets info from LDS websites now. Even your page, meaning Marriage on the Tightrope, and Facebook altogether, she just avoids." Mm-hmm. That's not an uncommon place to be. Natasha, you were going to say something.
I do think that's not an uncommon place to be, and that she's probably in a space of protection and discomfort and pain, and so avoiding the topic, at least in the short term, can do that. And I think sometimes there's seasons when that's actually an okay thing to do, that you may not be able to face everything right away. At the same time, avoiding conflict, it's kind of like, isn't it Brené Brown that says when you avoid feelings, you don't just avoid the difficult feelings, you avoid the positive feelings, right? So when you avoid certain types of intimacy and closeness and connection, it does affect your intimacy overall. It's like there's this area that we know we're not going to touch. So conflict is protected, but intimacy isn't. So every choice you make in that regard comes at a cost, right? Comes with a consequence per se. So the consequence of being more intimate and dealing with more conflict might cost some pain and some discomfort and some uncertainty, but also staying in very safe places of avoidance also costs you levels of intimacy. So that's an ongoing dance that you have to kind of navigate, and some couples do better at that than others, and for different time frames. So let's dive into even a little bit deeper, because I think that there's the next 2 slides. One is going to be more about, okay, if I'm the one that's resisting taking the class, what do I need to be thinking about? Right. And then the other slide is more about, okay, if my partner is the one resisting the class, what might I be thinking about? So let's start with me, right? So a good question to ask yourself is, well, am I scared? Am I hurt? Am I in some type of relational pain? Like there's probably a reason why I'm in protective mode, right? So when you think about a hurt animal, what's a hurt animal doing? They're not like, here I am, come get me. They're in a corner, like lashing out at the person who's trying to help them. But they don't know that, and they just feel like they're in danger. So they're getting into fetal position, they're gnashing their teeth, and they're in a corner trying as much as they can to protect themselves. So if we're in a space of resistance, usually there's pain, and that's something that's important for us to face and to be willing to look at. Am I hopeless for change, therefore paralyzed from even trying? Sometimes the stories we tell ourselves, the cognitive distortions that we have really paralyze us. It's like, what's the point? Nothing's going to change. Do I feel broken? Am I broken? Am I not enough in this relationship? Do I feel like no matter what I do, it's not going to be enough? Am I worried that if I commit to this, that I might give my partner false expectations? Right? So if I say, sure, honey, I'll take the class, that means that you're hopeful that I might come back to church or that I might leave church, right? So I don't want to give you any of that expectations. I'm just going to avoid the whole thing altogether.
Right.
I don't want to lock myself in, right, to things. Am I feeling pressured or disrespected by my spouse? Like, is my spouse pressuring or encouraging this class in inappropriate ways, right? So I'm feeling like resistance and defensiveness instead of an invitation. And is my kind of like what one of the people said, is my overall satisfaction, actually, Katie, you were talking about this. If I'm satisfied at a higher level than my partner's satisfied, I might be like, I think things are okay. Why do we need to take this class?
Right.
Like,
Yeah.
I'm doing fine over here.
Yeah.
But if your partner is saying, hey, I'm really struggling and I'd really like to take this class, that might be something to be tuning into. I'm always really saddened when a couple's coming in for marriage therapy or divorce, actually therapy at that point, and they're just like, they're like, one person's like, I'm ready to get a divorce, and the other person tells me, I didn't even see this coming. Usually when somebody tells me they didn't see it coming, because they weren't paying attention and they were very comfortable. Whatever was happening was good enough for them. But the partner, it wasn't good enough. And so that is dangerous. That's something that you should be afraid of, if that makes sense. Back to the bear in the tent imagery. So thoughts about this, as far as just why might I be resistant to be taking this class?
I think that it's hard to ask yourself this question, right? Because you have to be honest with yourself. And I think it's hard for people to admit where they're at or how they feel, or to feel discomfort, or to feel bad about, where they might be. I think it's one thing to ask your partner, right? Because the pressure's on them, but I think it's much more difficult to ask yourself the question.
Yeah, that third bullet point reminds me of a lesson that we learned pretty early on, after I had kind of come to my conclusion about my beliefs, that if there's something positive, if I have a positive experience with the church, that third bullet point, similar to what you outlined with the course, I'm thinking to myself, am I giving her false hope if I say something like, I really enjoyed that talk? Or do I have to be constantly negative so she can see that this is a bad thing? And vice versa. If Katie, and I think, at least in our marriage, I think that was the more likely scenario. If Katie saw something that she didn't like about her experience at church, or something to do with the church in general, would there be a hesitation for her to not say that to me, because I'm going to go, yes, one step further, one step closer. And
well, and then there's that, I mean, you could have dogpiled on anything I said,
yeah.
right?
And so that's a big part of it. It's really an olive branch, and it's building that bridge over to your spouse of when something, it's not all black and white. There's this big gray area. And if something positive happens in my experience with the church, that's me showing her that, hey, I still appreciate things about the organization that you still associate with. And I really appreciated Elder Holland's talk, or this message. I think that's quite important. So a little bit off topic, but fits that third bullet point that you just walked us through.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think you're right, Katie. It is hard. And a lot of our goal here is to teach emotional intelligence, right? And that's, again, something most of us are not naturally good at or born with. I
Right.
usually say, it's interesting that we as human beings rely on connection to survive, and yet our instinct to survive will trump connection every time. Right. So even though we need connection, if I feel threatened, the last thing I'm going to do in that moment is usually connect. So emotional intelligence is actually getting past our instincts, which is very, very difficult, because your instincts for survival are kicking in nanoseconds, right? As you're having these kinds of relational discourses together. So it's very, very, it really takes skill and practice to get to a point where your emotional intelligence is better than what we just came wired with, supposedly.
Right.
So when you are not motivated, if my partner's the one who's resistant, I think some things that you can be thinking are, well, am I willing to take the risk to share my complaints in the first place? Sometimes when we have a resistant partner, when we have the partner that says, oh, this is no big deal, or I don't want to, we just shut down. Again, that discomfort keeps us from really self-advocating. And again, because many of us are avoidant, we'd rather just not ruffle the waters. And so it does take some bravery, some courage to actually stay in the process and say, hey, actually, this is really important to me, or I get what you're saying, but I need you to listen to me too, right? And to continue the conversation, and not at the first kind of discomfort to just back up and say, fine then, So how do you stay engaged in a process of asking respectfully for what your needs are? You probably do need to think, am I pressuring in ways that leave my partner feeling invalidated, broken, or less than? So is the way that I'm going about inviting my partner to this not helping me, right? Am I shooting myself in the foot in how I'm going about this process? Another idea that I talk about a lot is, am I participating in protection intimacy instead of real intimacy? I think in Mormon marriages, this has been very much role modeled, as well as, again, I see a lot of Mormon culture attached to American culture, at least Mormon United States culture, where we have talked a lot about protecting our spouse, especially like Mormon men have been told to not offend their wives and to treat them like they're beautiful and, special flowers. And even as women, we've been told to be a helpmeet to your partner and be a comforter. And so those things are kind of, they're loving in a way, and yet they don't really engender really showing up. They don't really engender showing up, especially if what shows up I know is going to hurt you. So if I'm going to be real with you, if I'm going to be honest with you, it is going to be uncomfortable. It is going to be hurtful. And so I'm in this space of, but I can't hurt you. I need to protect you. That's a false intimacy. So am I really able to show up and show you who I am? Our feelings, again, of rejection getting in the way of compassion or curiosity. So because your partner maybe is resistant, do you just feel this rejection and this hopelessness instead of getting curious? Why is this difficult for you? Why are you struggling with taking this class, or with my suggestion about this? Have I been a problem, and how I've come across with it, right? So are you asking questions that really elicit curiosity as to why your partner is struggling? And again, do I pursue in a way that actually lessens the likelihood that I'll get what I want? Am I pressuring? Am I belittling? Am I being condescending? Am I sharing my anger and my frustrations instead of my sadness or my feelings of empathy and things of that nature?
Yeah. We have a question that fits right here, and with the thoughts that I have, at least. Mm-hmm. The question is, how do you balance between asking for your spouse to change or to do something versus loving them the way that they are? And are those two things mutually exclusive? Can you do both of those things? That wasn't part of the question. I added that last part.
Well, that is the question of marriage, right?
Right.
I mean, on the one side of the coin is, I need you to accept me and love me as I am. Just, this is who I am, and You need to accept me and love me the way I am. But the other side of that coin is that other person is saying that too. Like, you need to accept me the way I am. And so if the way I am is I don't want to take this class, and the way I am is I do want to take this class, then you're in a conundrum.
Right.
And so every marriage, every relationship really, but in marriage in particular, requires a balance of compromise. We talk a lot about authenticity, especially in post-Mormon land. Probably those who are still in are probably sick of the word authenticity. And so I talk a lot about systemic authenticity. We do all kinds of things for the people that we love that aren't necessarily motivated by individual interest. I change poopy diapers, I do laundry, I clean poopy butts, I, do all kinds of things. Yeah. And I do that not because I woke up that morning going, oh, I feel like it's very authentic of me right now to change a poopy diaper. No, but I woke up feeling authentic as a mom, right? Yeah. Or a wife, or a partner, or a parent, or a daughter, or whatever those things are. And so your needs matter and my needs matter. And so usually effective couples have a general kind of, John Gottman talks about this as far as like bank deposits, kind of this idea of emotional bank accounts, where both of you have the capacity to lean towards the other person when something is very important to them, and they also have the capacity to lean towards you. Where couples run into a problem is when it's too one-sided, right? And every couple will have some unresolvable issues. So maybe this is one of them. Maybe you're not going to take this class, right? Maybe this is an unresolvable issue, but you also have resolvable problems, and those are the ones that you want to focus on. We are hoping through this class that the taking of this class is not the problem. We're hoping that the taking of this class is helping you resolve the aspects of your mixed faith marriage that are solvable.
Yeah, this reminds me of just on that one specific topic of church attendance, looking at how our family has approached that compromise of church attendance since we began the podcast. Began in January 2018, and there was, at that date, you are there, you being the family, we're going to be there every single week for all 3 hours, and that's how it is. And since then, two years, 4 months later, we've had periods where I have not gone at all. I didn't like being alone. She didn't like me not being there. So we've constantly had this not tug of war, but this back and forth of compromise of she understanding that why it's difficult for me to be there. And so understanding why I can't be. And then when I'm at home, I'll be making lunch or cleaning up some of the time. And I don't want to create an unrealistic painting of what's actually happening at home. I leveled quite a bit in Warcraft during those Sundays. But and then you go all the way to where we're at today, which is nobody's attending church. But once church is back in session, it's on the first Sunday of each month, we have home church. And we build the agenda together. And then on the rest of the Sundays, I attend sacrament and then leave after sacrament. And she and the kids stay. And that's just where we are right now. And we reserve the right for that not to work in the future. And if it continues to work, great, we'll continue to do it. I think one of the biggest lessons that we've learned is be willing to try. Just we're willing to try it. And that's what that compromise is about. And if it's a bad experience, shoot, man, we've had a bunch of those. That's okay. We'll have a bad experience and we'll compromise and move forward with the next one.
Yeah, I really like that example because it allows for flexibility. It allows for not having to make decisions that are final, that you can come back to the drawing table and say, I thought this might work, but it's really not working for me. This is why. How else could we compromise on this, etc.?
Yeah, definitely.
All right. So, yeah, did you have anything, Katie?
No. Yeah, no.
All right. So we're just going to kind of finish up with some strategies on maybe having these conversations about why it might be important to prioritize your time, your energy, some money into this process of taking a class like this one. I think it is important to not leave your mixed faith marriage to chance. I think that most, like you're saying, I think one of you said, is sometimes it's just easier to avoid the pain, and that feels like that'll be the better thing because you avoid that initial conflict. And yet that leaves a lot of things to chance. And when you leave things to chance, you can be surprised in some really unfortunate ways down the road. Plus, anything that we want in life that's usually worthwhile means it takes some effort. It needs some planning. It needs some. I would love to just say, I would love to leave my biceps to chance, just have them magically appear.
Doesn't quite work.
Right? But anything that's usually worthwhile requires work. And again, from our Mormon ethic that we come from, that's very much driven into us, and why I actually love working with Mormon people in general, whether they're believers or post-believers or in the middle, because they tend to have very good work ethic, which makes working in this kind of field very rewarding because people are serious about improving.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
I think that you can do an assessment using this presentation. Hopefully you can sit down as a partnership and revisit what we've been talking about in the slides and say, okay, this is where I see us in this. This is where I see myself in this. This is some of the ways that we have struggled to talk or discuss, and maybe this could be an asset for us, etc. And then I'm going to share with you a script which will actually include some things that I'd like to talk to you about. So I'm going to include a repair attempt. Repair attempts are important. John Gottman talks about those. I'm going to include a sandwich approach. I'm going to talk about systemic blame, and I'm going to talk about process focus. These are actually 4 things that can help your relationship. So we can start with, I love you. So this is the sandwich approach. We're going to start with bread. Bread is soft, bread is carby, bread is delicious. You're going to start with soft, yummy stuff, not, hey, why aren't we taking this class? Right? It's more like, so you want to start relationally. I love you, like more than anything. I want to feel connected to you, honey, right? Like I want us to feel intimate. I want to feel like I can share anything with you. I want to feel like we can trust each other. Fill in the blank to what's important to you. I want this with you. You matter to me. You're my choice. You're my partner, right? We connected for reasons that maybe we don't know all the time why, but we did. And that really is meaningful to me, right? So start with the bread. Then let's go into some systemic blame. So many times we're blaming ourselves or we're blaming our partner. And usually these issues are much bigger than the two of you. So how can you say something like, I think we might be doing the best we know how. I think that we're coming at this with good intentions. I don't think that either one of us are waking up in the morning trying to ruin each other's lives. I don't think that's the intent. But I also don't think that maybe our upbringings or our church or our families or even some of our genetics and biology equipped us to really have the tools we need to know how to manage this particular struggle. I always tease that the Mormons are really good at coming up with manuals and having a lot of instructions, but not for how to leave the church and not how to have a mixed faith marriage, right? So, which is typically what church would have those kinds of manuals? Nobody would, right? The Catholics don't want you to leave. The Jews don't want you to leave. Nobody wants you to leave. So they're not going to help you do that. But that leaves you in a space of vulnerability, right? And you haven't been equipped with tools on knowing how to do that well. So that's systemic blame. We're not going to blame something bigger than the two of us so that then we can join in that fight. Instead of us being the enemies, we have a bigger enemy, which is miseducation on this particular topic. Does that make sense?
Yeah. Then
we're going to talk about, again, we're going to put the meat in. So in the sandwich approach, now we're going to say the heavy stuff, the meat. So, and we're going to do that in a way that really focuses on process, which is your feelings, not information, which is like, like the last thing you should be talking about is Joseph Smith or the ensign or the Book of Mormon. Like you're going to talk about your feelings, right? When you're approaching this. So I need to be able to talk to you about what I need. You're my wife, you're my husband, right? I know that I need to be able to listen to you better. I want more than what we currently have. What we currently have isn't good enough. I want to be able to not have this divide between us. I want to be able to have a discussion about some of these things without both of us kind of, ending in tears or kind of in fights. I think that getting help from qualified professionals who are offering a program for people in our circumstance is the wise decision. I think that this is really, I feel strongly that this would be very helpful. I want to do this with you. And I want to do it in a way that we can be strong and empowered and not feel broken or disappointed with one another. If we don't do this, I'm concerned for us. I'm concerned about our viability as a couple. I'm scared. I don't want to lose our marriage, right? So you're talking about process. I'm scared. I'm sad. I'm worried. And I'm hurting over this, right? So you're sharing a lot of feelings. Okay. And then, the last thing, you're going to wrap it up with a repair attempt, which means you're going to give an olive branch. John Gottman talks a lot about how successful, effective couples are constantly offering and receiving repair attempts. They're bids, right? You're giving an emotional bid. So you can say, I'm sorry for the ways that I've contributed to this, to the dilemmas that we're having. I may not even totally understand how I'm contributing to the problems. And I think I need to learn how I am. I think that's what this class is going to help teach me and you, right? And I want to do better. I want to do better in my own reactivity, in my own emotional maturity, in my intelligence, emotionally, etc. So please forgive me for probably the many ways I have hurt you. And maybe you know what those ways are. Maybe you actually know. And so be very specific about the ways that you feel like you've hurt your partner in this process.
Yeah. Can I try to do this live?
Yeah.
That approach real quick?
Okay.
Do it.
So the topic.
No.
But wait, before sorry, there was one last piece. So there's the last bread, the last piece of the sandwich.
You can't, you either have to go full protein style with no bread or you 2 slices. So give us the last slice, please.
So it's just like, again, coming back to the marriage, right? Like, I love you. I chose you. I love our kids. I love there's so many things I love about you. I've learned so much from you, right? I've grown up with you. If you got married in your early 20s and you're now in your 30s or 40s, I'm sorry, but you've grown up with this person. Like, you were stupid to begin with. And you've gone through a whole developmental stage together. Right. So just, it's ending with this kind of love and this bid for emotional connection. Okay, Allan, take it away.
Okay, let's hear it.
You want to hear it?
Yep.
Okay, so this is real time, and this is something we hopefully can all relate to. We don't get any alone time during this lockdown stuff because the kids, we've got 4 of them, and they are just blankets on top of us at all times.
Yeah.
So, Katie, I love you easily more than the kids, but more than anything else in this whole world, I love you. And I want nothing more than just to get some alone time with you because you're my best friend and I absolutely love you. I know it's not like our fault that we're not getting that time. We've never been through something like this before. We've never had to be locked in our home for 2 months and figure out how to have a good relationship with our kids and with each other and be school teachers all of a sudden and work from home in this sweatshop of an office where, I'm not this bald. I'm just wet. And, but like, I want you to know, I need to be able to have that time with you. I'm sorry for, I've said that I would get off of work a little early to help with dinner, and it hasn't happened as much as I would like. I could do a better job at pushing us to go on more walks around the neighborhood. Today was a great day. I loved the walk that we had, and that little alone time was great, even though one kid was with us. He wasn't paying attention to us. And I love you and I want more time with you. How'd I do? Was that okay?
That was great.
Okay, move on.
But really, the person you probably need to ask more than me is Katie.
Well, I was looking at her on the screen. I mean all of that. I want more alone time. Can we wrap this up? We want to go watch The Office. I'm kidding.
Are you avoiding her response?
No. What do you think?
I agree. We do need some more time together, and I love you also. And let's find a way that we can work it into the schedule where we can be alone and be without the kids and spend quality time together. So thank you for that.
I love it. I'm stopping the video so we can kiss real quick.
Oh, no, they heard it.
That's all right. All right, we're back.
Aw, I want to kiss. Mwah. Mwah. All right. So to wrap it up, if you saw value in what we shared tonight, this is just really some ideas just to kind of get you thinking about what we might be offering. We have the topics on what we will be offering. We'll be talking about how to understand faith transitions to begin with, what they're about and why they tend to happen and how they happen. We're going to talk a lot about kind of relational components that can help you, as well as parenting, as well as family and friends, and ward relationships like ecclesiastical leaders and boundaries. There's going to be a lot of content that I think will be very useful information, lots of specific strategies. And so if you're interested, if you like our style, that's sometimes important. If you don't like the person who's teaching you, then you probably want to find another teacher.
Yeah, good luck with that.
Right. Yeah, there's not a ton of teachers.
If we're comfortable enough for you and you enjoy our personalities and stuff, we would like to invite you to register and sign up for our class. It's starting Monday night. So April 13th, is that right? Do I have that right?
Yep, that's right.
And you can find information on either my website directly, natashaparker.org. I have a link to it, or on eventbrite.com.
Yep, you can find it on Eventbrite by searching for Workshop on a Tightrope under the online events.
I think all they have now is online events.
That's a good point.
Right.
So yeah, you definitely, we would love to have you, and we're excited for it to get started.
That's right. So I'll stop the share, and and we'll make sure to and link to it, on the Facebook feeds and social media feeds. But we are so glad you spent this time with us tonight. And Allan and Katie, thank you so much for joining me on this project.
Thanks, Natasha. We're so excited to have you as well.
All right. So do we want to stop the recording? And then, I don't know if you want to ask more questions before we stop the recording, or do you want me to stop the recording?
Does anybody have any questions before we stop the recording? And I don't know if anyone, people that we've had a number of people join and drop. So those that are still here, if you have any questions, doesn't have to be about the workshop, but it certainly can be. Feel free to type them in here, but then we could, if there aren't any, we can just stop the recording, open it up so that you can join you could share your video and say hi if you'd like. And I just see some of the names on here, and I love you guys so much. So I think we're probably good to stop the recording. Oh, how often are the workshop classes, April? Someone asked.
Yes. Okay. So it's going to be, so once a week. So on Monday nights, we will have kind of like a lecture, kind of like we did tonight, a class, right? So, and at the end of each class, it'll be an interactive class, and it will only be open to registrants, so you can protect your anonymity that way. And so you can either ask questions along the way, or at the end of each class, we'll have time for Q&A. Then during the week, we will probably have like a little video where we will just share with you some homework assignments that we want you to try. Usually by either Tuesday or Wednesday night, you'll get those. And then
Wednesday, I think that's what we're saying.
Okay, Wednesday. We don't want to over-promise. And then on Sunday nights, we will have like an hour and a half just for Q&A. So whoever is part of the class can just show up. If you've got questions, we'll take them. If nobody shows up, we'll go to bed. So that's kind of how we're going to do it. And that's going to happen for 6 weeks. And it's all going to be recorded. So even if you can't participate live on some of the some of the events. You'll still have access to all of the lectures, the PowerPoints, the Q&A recordings, and of course the homework assignments. So that's what you can expect.
We had a question that said, unfortunately, I missed the majority of this meeting. Is there any way I can get an email of the different slides you shared, please? We will be posting the video to the Marriage on a Tightrope page
as well.
So you can either watch the whole thing or skip ahead to see those different slides. I think that would be a good way to do it.
Also, for anyone who does sign up, we'll send it out in the course. So if you end up signing up but you missed some of it, or if you're in it tonight and you decide and you've already signed up, we'll have those slides for you as well.
All right, so I'm going to stop recording, and then if you want to talk to people else.